examining these cores, he can tell whether, again, he's on the track of something that's likely to have an oil formation.
Now, let me set up a special problem for you, Howard. We have one of these anticlines. We know there's oil there because we sent a test drilling down, and we're all ready now to start production. How can we control the production?
We just happen to have another model here, Earl, that'll illustrate that.
Good.
You'll recall that we mentioned earlier this geologic formation known as an anticline. If you'll just imagine that we have sliced right down through one of these, through the middle, this is the representation of the model. Actually, this model was prepared by the Richfield Oil Company, and it's through their courtesy that we are able to use it this evening. It will illustrate how an oil field actually works. Down below here in the bottom is a formation that has salt water in it. Here is the oil sand, and you'll notice the darker color showing the presence of oil. And up at the top, this clear section, a very important part, is where the gas is accumulated. That's called the gas cap.
Well, gas, of course, would normally be in solution with the oil, so this must be the excess above that.
Yes, and it's a very important thing because the pressure exerted by this gas cap forces the oil down in this direction and up an oil well. And this represents the oil well that we have, and we're going to demonstrate how it actually flows.
I think we can also show that with a bottle of this type of Excelsior water. The carbon dioxide in here, notice what happens. You press on it, and out comes the liquid forced out by the gas.
The principle is exactly the same, Earl, and if I open up this well, which has been drilled into the oil sand, I think you'll see it start flowing. You'll also notice several other things. You'll notice that the oil level is dropping here as the gas pressure works in this direction and forces the oil on up the well. Now, this would go on for some little time, Earl, until the pressure in the gas cap were depleted. And then we'd have to provide some way to help the oil get to the surface. We would do that by adding a pump up here, and I think you've all seen the pump in the oil fields that goes up and down this way, which helps to lift the oil from here to here after the gas pressure has gone down quite a bit.
I believe you mentioned earlier today the amount of recovery that you could get by this method from a normal field would be, what, about 40% of the total oil there?
Unfortunately, that's about all we would normally get out of the field. We never can get all the oil, and I'm going to go back to the sponge to illustrate why that is. Here's a sponge, again, soaked with water, and if I squeeze this rather easily, we get out the easy 40% of the oil. Then if I squeeze it quite a bit harder, you'll see we get a lot more water out of it. But no matter how hard I squeeze, you're never going to get all of the water out of that sponge. And so in an oil field, some of the oil is always going to stay in the rock formation.
Well, now, since 2/3 of all the energy used in the United States comes from petroleum or petroleum products, it seems to me vitally important that we get every bit of this oil out here that we can.
You're exactly right, Earl, and to do that, we resort to what we call conservation practices, more efficient operational methods. It's a very important thing to all of us. And I'd like to illustrate two methods by which we can do this with this model. Now, you recall I said that the gas pressure gets depleted up in this section.
Yes.
Well, I think we can help nature out a bit by replenishing that gas pressure. And so the model illustrates what would happen if we had drilled a well into this part of the sand, and we're going to inject high-pressure gas. I'd like to have you just open the valve, and we will actually, that's enough, I think, inject some high-pressure gas, and I'll open the well again, and we'll see what happens. You'll notice that there's a very large flow of oil further down here, and a considerable increase in production into our surface tank. Now, if you'll cut that one off. The other way of doing this is to start from the bottom end. And here we can exert more pressure on this end of the oil field by adding to the water pressure. So we'll drill a well down here and add water under pressure to force the oil up toward the well and again to increase our production. So I'll add a little water here under pressure and again open up our producing well. And you'll notice a good bit more production and more oil being produced from this sand, so that we get a much higher total recovery than we would otherwise get. Well, this is called water injection, incidentally, and the earlier procedure is called gas injection.
Now, the 40% figure that you can recover from a normal well, that would be increased by how much if you use this water injection method plus the gas injection method?
Oh, I think we could get up to about 75%.
Well, that seems like the logical thing to do. How does it work in actual practice?
Well, I wish it were quite as simple as it sounds, but it gets complicated because people come into the picture. And if we had, for example, 3 owners of this oil field, suppose we had Mr. A owning this left-hand section, Mr. B owning the center section over to here, and Mr. C owning the right-hand section, we'd have something like this. Mr. A and Mr. C might like to do these recovery methods, this water injection and gas injection, but all they'd do would be to drive more oil up Mr. B's well. And so chances are they wouldn't do that. Instead, they would probably drill additional wells here and over here into the oil sand, and we'd get more oil all right temporarily, but in the long run, we'd lose oil because the pressures in the field would be depleted, and it would be an inefficient way to operate the field.
Well, how do you get around that problem?
By doing what's called unitization. This is a procedure whereby all the owners in the field combine their interest in the field and arrange to have it produced efficiently. Just the right number of wells, the right spacing, the right pressure maintenance, right gas injection, water injection, so we get the maximum possible recovery out of the field. It's a fine thing to do because each owner in the long run fares better, and certainly the public does too.
Well, now, I have seen some figures recently to the effect that, in 15 years, we would use up all of the oil resources in North America. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's a common figure, Earl, and don't be misled by it, because that assumes that we don't find any more oil, that all of these methods for improved location of oil and improved recovery of oil don't amount to anything, and a lot of other inappropriate facts. What actually that means is simply that we have a good backlog of oil with us at the present time.
Well, now, in this matter of exploration and getting new oil fields, I followed with considerable interest this offshore work that you've been doing, and I wonder if perhaps you could go into it, just what's involved in that.
I'd like to, Earl. Actually, we start out in offshore drilling in exactly the same way as if we were drilling onshore. That is, we locate a likely place. We do that by using the geologist, by using the geophysicist, the seismic crew, in just the same manner as we've described, whether it be on water or land. And then once we've got a likely spot, we can do either of two things. We can either drill from the land, or we can actually go out in the water and drill. The first of these we have illustrated here. It's a kind of an unusual procedure. This little diagram shows the shoreline off here, and a well on the shore, starting out here and coming down perhaps a couple of 1,000 feet. And then at an appropriate depth, we put a wedge down at one side of the drill pipe and actually turn the drill pipe in a slanting direction like this. It's called whipstocking. And we drill some thousands of feet out here below the surface of the water and under the water. And if we're lucky, as this chart would indicate we are, we hit an anticline and we have an oil field down here.
Well, now, if your oil field is too far out in the water to do this, then you have to go to this other method, which is relatively new. And how does this very interesting platform work?
Also relatively expensive, Earl. We can either go out in the water and drill an island and put a derrick on it and actually drill from it, but more commonly, if you go out in the water, you do something like this. We drive piles down at the actual bottom of the ocean and build up a platform such as this model shows. The water level might be about here, 50 or 60 feet to the platform to allow the waves to break under the platform. Incidentally, we can only go into water about 100 feet deep by using this sort of a method. Then on top of the platform, we have a derrick of the same kind we've described. We have the usual things around the bottom of the derrick, the drill pipe, crew's quarters over here, and then to really make it modern, we've shown a helicopter to take the crew to and from their shore quarters.
Well, I'd like to ask you one thing now, Howard. How is this going to increase our available supply of petroleum?
Well, we are sure that it will, Earl, because we know there's a lot of oil offshore. But it's going to come a little bit hard. As I mentioned, it's expensive to do this. We don't know how much oil we can find, but I'm sure we'll find quite a little bit. But I think the combination of things like this, exploration in new places around the world, improved scientific tools for finding oil, better recovery methods, all of these things are going to combine to ensure that we have a good backlog of oil for a great many years. And so don't worry about this 15-year period, Earl. We're going to be using a lot more oil by then, but I'm sure this oil industry of ours is going to be able to keep pace with it and keep a good reserve.
Well, that certainly is a very, very reassuring note. And Mr. Howard Vesper, I want to thank you for coming to Science in Action to tell us about the problems in the oil field.
Thank you, Earl. I've enjoyed it.
Now, I'll be back in just a moment with the Animal of the Week. Our Animal of the Week is the kinkajou, and one of the nicest and one of the most strangest animals we've had on the program. He's very much interested in his name sign here. He's a special pet of Don McNeely. Now, Don, this is an animal that comes out only at night, is that right?
Strictly nocturnal, Doctor, and strictly arboreal, which means, of course, that he stays in the trees his whole life.
Perhaps you could pick him up by this tail as you were demonstrating a little bit earlier.
Yes, this is unusual for a member of the raccoon family. It's the only member of the raccoon family with a prehensile tail, which means, of course, that he can hang by it.
Doesn't bite, doesn't scratch, makes a very good pet.
Makes a wonderful children's pet. That's right. He has a very thick, heavy fur here. It's virtually impossible for fleas to live in there. It's so thick and tight.
Oh, you little rascal.
He likes that.
I wonder if we can feed him something here. You have something there we
Yes,
can feed him,
you bet.
and we'll see how he reacts when the food comes over here.
This is a can of dog food, which is his staple in his diet. He also rates a quarter of an apple or some grapes and some orange. Anything we happen to have around the house.
Oh, look at him go at that.
Get it right
Come
on
out of
it,
there,
yeah.
Kinky, you little rascal. Well, let's see. These fellows live in Mexico and down into Central America and into South America.
Yes, this particular model is from Peru.
He is the cutest model I've seen in many a day. This is about a full-grown animal?
Yes, I'd say he was 8 months old, which means that he's matured as far as size goes. And he has a honey-colored underside there, which is quite beautiful. Too bad we don't have colored teeth.
He wants that.
He's really hungry, this guy.
He wants that food again, doesn't he?
That's right.
Well, he holds on here.
You can really hold on with everything.
Rascal. About how much would he weigh? About, what, a couple of pounds?
3 pounds at the outside.
How long have you had him, Don?
We've just had him a couple months. He's right out of the jungles, and the day we took him out of the crate, he was just as gentle and friendly as he is now.
Now, your youngsters play with him all the time, do they?
Yes, all the kids in the neighborhood, of course, play with him, and if he didn't sleep so much in the daytime, they'd have more fun with him, but he really comes alive at night.
Does he take the house apart at night?
Well, he takes the pictures off the walls.
Oh, he does? Oh, he is really active. I've never seen anything like this before. Well, for a member of the raccoon family, I'll say this most certainly is the best one to be found in South America. There's no question about that. We've had coati-mundis on before, and as they're youngsters, of course, they're very nice, but they can't compare with this. Well, Don, I hope you'll keep us informed as to how your little rascal does and let us know in the future.
You bet I will.
Now, this is one type of energy that you are seeing demonstrated here, chemical energy. There are various types of energy, and on our next program, we will look into the problems of work, energy, and power, when our special guest will be Professor Harvey E. White of the University of California. I hope that you'll plan to be with us then. Thanks a lot.
You have just seen another in the fascinating television series, Science in Action. Science in Action is produced by the California Academy of Sciences under the supervision of its director, Dr. Robert C. Miller.